I think that's the fastest we've ever been able to get everybody into the room at the same time. So thank you for coming today. We have a very interesting panel today. I'm just going to open up our Reinventing Maine's Pulp, Paper, and Forest Product Industry Forum today, and introduce and recognize some of the sponsors that we have today. I'm going to start with our gold sponsor, Pierce Atwood. Thank you for supporting us. Pierce Atwood has been around for about 120 years, has offices throughout New England and down in Washington, D.C. Their clients are regional and local enterprises, utilities, finance organizations, companies, entrepreneurs, and individuals, multinational corporations, and state and foreign governments. They have a very thriving energy, environmental, and business practice. Bill Taylor is the chair of the E2Tech program committee, and he'll be moderating the panel a little bit later. I'd also like to thank our silver sponsors today, Stantec. We have some representatives from the company here today. Can you raise your hand? Coastal Enterprise, CEI, we have someone here today from there. 19 Oaks, Fairchild Semiconductor, and Maine Biz. I'd like to start off by introducing our platinum sponsor, Drummond Woodsum. They were founded in 1965 with offices in Portland, Maine, and Portsmouth and Manchester, New Hampshire. They have a very wide and diverse national and international reach. Their attorneys and consultants provide a full range of legal and consulting services for clients throughout the U.S., which range from some of the nation's largest corporations to small startup companies, financial institutions, municipalities, school districts, and individuals. I want to start out today by introducing Joanna Ferrangio. She's going to provide some introductory remarks before we get started with the panel today. So, Joanna?
Good morning. I'm Joanna Ferrangio from Drummond Woodsum. I know that no one is here this morning to hear me speak, but I did just want to take a quick minute to say how excited I am and how excited Drummond Woodsum is to be a sponsor of this program. Many moons ago, my grandfather was a civil engineer from Maine, traveling around the United States working on big infrastructure projects, and he was able to come back to the state of Maine and settle and eventually turn me into a Mainer through his daughter because of his work and employment at the Old Town Mill. And then many moons later, I was able to come back to the state of Maine after not being able to wait to get down to Washington, D.C., and then not being able to wait to get back after school. I was able to come back to the state of Maine and establish an environmental law practice in large measure due to the paper industry in the state of Maine. And I think that the changes that we're going to hear about today will enable not just me, this isn't a story about me, but millions of, or at least thousands of others like me, probably not millions, but many other people in the state to be able to come back here and have quality jobs and to build the economy of the state of Maine. And that is just really a delight to me personally. So thank you for being here. I can't wait to hear everything that you have to say, and I'm so pleased to be able to help with this presentation. Thank you.
I'm wearing multiple hats today, so I'm going to be back to the changing slides here and there, but Bill will be facing you throughout the entire program. So, thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Jeff, and thanks, Joanna. I'm going to introduce the panelists all at once so we can save some time and they can have a seamless presentation. But before introducing them, I just wanted to say and echo some of the things that Joanna has said. As I looked at the list today, I looked at the people that are attending, I realize that many of you, and most of you, have had some interaction with the pulp and paper industry, either as consultants, attorneys, technical advisors, and it just reinforces how important the pulp and paper industry is for Maine. And what you're going to hear is very inspiring. At least the folks that we have on the panel are doing things that are remarkable to keep the industry vibrant. And so I think you're going to enjoy the presentations. Speaking first will be John Williams. John has been the president of the Maine Pulp Paper Association since 2002, and I can't believe it's been that long, John. It's flown by, 12 years. John has been very active promoting the industry both at the legislature and through public education and through other avenues. And John's going to give a brief overview of the status of the industry and where it stands today and where it's likely to be going. John has a degree in geology and has previously worked as director of the Maine Land Use Regulation Commission and also as the director of the Maine Waste Management Agency. So he comes from he has a great background for what he's doing with the Maine public paper industry. Following John will be Donna Cassese, who's the managing director of Sappi Paper Westbrook. She also went to the University of Maine as a forestry major. She has worked in just about every position imaginable in the paper industry, culminating as managing director at Westbrook. And she has been very instrumental in guiding Westbrook Mill as they lost their pulp mill in, I believe, 2004 or 5, as a result of the cluster rule, in reshaping the Westbrook Mill and making it viable for the future. So I think you're going to be very interested to hear what Donna has to say about the Westbrook Mill and what they're doing. And then finally, we're going to hear from Daryl Waite of Old Town Fuel and Fiber. Daryl is a chemical engineer by training from the University of Maine, and he has management responsibility for innovation and emerging technologies at Old Town Fuel and Fiber. He's the holder of several patents, and he is one of the leading experts in the world in converting wood biomass to cellulosic sugars. And he has told me just previously to this, my first meeting with him, that what Old Town Fuel and Fiber is doing at Old Town is not being done anywhere in the world. They are the world leader in conversion of wood biomass to cellulosic sugars. So thank you for coming, and I hope you enjoy our panelists. We'll start with John Williams.
Thanks. I'm going to give a broad overview today. First here, I want to plug the book, Trees to Paper. This is a kid's book, which I was the content consultant for. And if you look at it, it says basically, you know, trees become pulp, become paper, and that's about the depth that this book has. That's about the depth that I have. And when I'm on a panel with chemical engineers, I try not to get into any more detail than that, but I'm going to today. I'm going to kind of walk you through the paper making process and then give you an overview of what's happening in Maine in the pulp and paper industry. I actually put this first slide on for Eric Kingsley's benefit. Eric is not here, but we hosted a symposium a couple years ago on the paper industry fighting back against the digital challenges. And afterwards, Eric sent me this picture of the candles leading the light bulb to the gallows. I hope that today you'll realize that we are not fighting back against digital challenges, but trying to reinvent ourselves in ways that will give us a long future and an exciting future, and I think you'll hear some of that with our speakers today. Okay. So if I push that one, no. There we go. There we go. Yep. Point right. That direction. In the middle. Okay. I'm not seeing these too well from here, but I hope they're showing up better in back. But as I said, I'm going to walk you quickly through how paper is made. And without talking about it, I think you'll see some of the innovations that have happened over time. On the left here is the Great Northern Paper Mill. And on the right, I believe that might be a Sappi mill, I'm not sure. But I'm going to give you an overview on paper making. Maybe. Okay, so here's the basic process. We're going to go from trees, turning it into pulp. Okay. The pulp is going to get convert it into paper, or up on the top there, you might take a recycled paper stream and put in. But I know you can't really see that, so I'm going to go through a few slides to give you the basic concept here. First off, you harvest the fiber. The fiber does not have to be wood. It can be cloth. In fact, it originally was cloth. It can be hemp. It can be any number of things. But by and large, the fiber these days is coming from trees. You haul those trees to the mill, where they are chipped into small pieces. And then those chips are heated, they're beaten mechanically, sometimes chemicals are added to them, basically forming a pulp. Now that's as far as some of our mills are taking things these days. 3 of our mills take that wet pulp, form it into sheets, dry it, bale it, and ship it as market pulp. This is the Woodland Mill on the left, and those are their bales getting ready to go somewhere to Asia, out of the port of Eastport. 3 of our mills make they make pulp, and that's as far as they take it. That is Woodland. It's also Old Town. Darrell will be talking to you about that. They do a lot more things than this, but they're making pulp. That's their primary product right now. And Auburn Cascades Fiber, which makes recycled de-inked pulp. There are a couple of other mills, Rumford and Skowhegan, that will also sell, or do also sell market pulp, but that's not their primary business. I'm not sure if making market pulp is innovative, but it is a growing industry here in the state. In the past 10 or 15 years, the market pulp has just about doubled from what it was. There was a time when most mills like Donna's were integrated mills that they made the pulp got made into paper at the same facility. Well, Donna's mill no longer makes pulp. They just make the paper and buy their pulp from someone else. And that's a trend that seems to have been happening. And that makes more of a market for market pulp. Now, there are some real innovative things going on in the pulp side, particularly coming out of Old Town Fuel and Fiber and the University of Maine, where they are now making from that pulp, from the same process, biofuels and bioplastics, and I believe that's what Darrell will be talking to you about. But if you want to move forward and then make paper out of the pulp, you take the wet, slurry pulp out of the barrel, you spray it through a head box onto a wire where a sheet is formed, and then that sheet, which is soaking wet, gets pressed, and that's to get much of the water out, and then it goes through a drying process and ultimately made into rolls. The wet end is where the process is where it's being formed, and the dry end being where the drying takes place and ultimately the rolls get made. So here's a few pictures. I'm not sure where the one on the left is, but the one on the right is up in Millinocket of the wet end of the process. And the dry end, this time the left is in Millinocket, and the right is one of the Verso mills here in the state. But what we ultimately make a lot of are rolls of paper. We don't make this, for example. We make rolls that get shipped somewhere else and converted into whatever the final product will be. Those rolls will have different consistencies. They might be tissue paper, they might be magazine paper, they might be any number of things, but they're basically made into their final product somewhere else. These are some of the products, and these are specialty papers. I'm going to start kind of in the middle with a release paper that is made in Westbrook, and that's what Donna will be talking to you about. On the right, the cookie bag and the sugar bag, that's a specialty product made by Verso Paper. The dog food bags are made in Madawaska. And on the left are napkins, deep-dyed tissue. And that's one of the first places I'm going to stop and talk to you about innovation. It may not seem that that's an innovative product. We've obviously had napkins for a long time. But this is a product made in Lincoln, and they've got a process where they can get these really deep dyes and make beautiful napkins or display party-type things. And not only do the colors come out great, but when you put your drink down, it doesn't leave a red mark or a blue mark, whatever color the napkin is, on your drink. And Lincoln has done very well with this process. A very specialty, a very niche market, and that's the type of thing that many of our mills now are trying to find, is some little segment of the market like that where they can excel. Specialty papers, again, made at Donna's Mill in Westbrook, made in Lincoln, and there's also some made at the two Verso mills and at Madawaska, but again, in those mills, that's not their primary product, but they do make some specialty products. Well, what we make for the most part in Maine are printing papers. These are papers that you will use to make a magazine, make a catalog, make a newspaper. All of these, I don't know, well, some of them I know are made in Maine, but these are the types of papers made in Maine. Again, starting in the middle, the catalogs, you want a type of paper that's really going to show off what you're trying to sell through that catalog. The New York Times Magazine, that paper is made at Madison, at the UPM Madison Mill. On the lower right, that's 50 Shades of Grey. That is a book that not only was great for the author and the publisher, but kept the East Millinocket Mill in business for a long time. The Bangor Daily News, the newsprint for that, until about a month ago, was made in East Millinocket, and I hope it will be again, but it's not at the moment. Then on your left, National Geographic. This is really our specialty, not National Geographic itself, but paper, coated paper, where you're really emphasizing the pictures, Vogue, Cosmopolitan, National Geographic, that type of publication. 7 of our mills, shown in purple here, make these publication papers. So that's really the bulk of what we make in the state. And it's an area that's under intense competition. It's under competition from digital, reading stories online. I know Whit Richardson is here, and I was telling him earlier, I always look to the Bangor Daily News or the Portland Press Herald to figure out what's going on, and I admit, I do that online these days. Despite the fact that I'm at the right-hand side of this curve. This is an issue that's going to get more challenging for us as those of us on the right-hand side of the curve fall off the curve. This is newspaper readership by age cohort. Even our own industry publication, Pulp and Paper International, sent an advertisement saying, "You'll love PPI online." And it's not only the challenge from digital competition, but from other states and primarily other countries. This is a new mill in China. It was a story written about in the Wisconsin papers. In China, I don't remember the number of years, but over the next few years, the capacity that they have to bring new coated paper machines online exceeds all of the paper that's being produced in Europe right now. And Europe's a pretty big paper-making region. So we have a lot of challenges in the paper, the printing paper, publishing paper end of things. For years, we keep making more paper than we've ever made before here in Maine. And that was true until probably about 5 years ago. It's hard to know if some of that dip that you see at the end is caused by the recession. But I may not be able to say anymore that we're making more paper than ever before, but we're certainly making a lot more paper than we did when we think of it being in the heyday of the paper industry. But because of this competition and because of issues in the industry, the paper industry has been in the news quite a bit lately. In East Millinocket, the facility there was shut, I believe it was in January, for 16 weeks. They're hoping to bring it back up, but currently that facility is down. At Lincoln in November, there was a boiler explosion. Without their boiler, they really weren't able to make pulp, and therefore they weren't able to make much of their paper profitably. Lincoln has made the decision, at least for now, not to rebuild that boiler, but instead just to focus on their specialty napkin side of things, specialty tissue papers that I showed you earlier. Rumford, Jay, and Bucksport are owned by either Verso paper or New Page paper. There is a process going on now where Verso is trying to merge with New Page, but Verso would actually sort of take over New Page. I'm not sure if that's going to happen, but if that does happen, probably even if it doesn't happen, you'll have a lot of the coated paper business in Maine and in the nation in one entity, and that entity is going to be looking for where they can make efficiency changes. And so we're hoping that in the end of that, whatever happens, whether that happens or doesn't happen, that the 3 mills in Maine are able to outcompete the other 8 that would be owned by either DuPage or Verso nationwide, and keep the jobs and the benefits here. Well, in the printed paper business, I don't want to make it seem like we're just done. There are things that you can do on print that you just never can do digitally. And in fact, there's some evidence that magazine sales are going back up. Some new, Newsweek, for example, is coming back in production after going out. SAPI has been doing a lot of work in print. And it really, I picked this up at Skowhegan, and I'd actually like somebody to tell me all about it, but I haven't had that opportunity yet. But I'm going to pass this around, and while we're talking, if you just want to look at some of the things that, through SAPI's innovation, they're doing for print, you're not going to be able to see that too well from here, but these are different techniques they use for printing, and then if you want to find out more about it, you scan the little bar here, and then your digital thing will tell you more about how that's made. Pass that around. Finally, I'm going to finish off talking about innovations in energy at the mills, because that's where a lot of the innovation is going on right now. There are a lot of process changes happening. Variable speed motors. About 10 years ago, if you had a motor and you needed 500 gallons a minute, that motor put out 500 gallons a minute, but when you only needed 100 gallons a minute, it still put out 500 gallons a minute. There's new technology now with variable speed motors, and I think that Ian is here from Efficiency Maine, maybe others. They're really promoting this and helping a lot of the mills in the state convert. I talked about the shoe press. That's part of the reason I went through that very quick explanation of what's going on. The more water you can get out at the beginning of the process, mechanically, the less drying you have to have. And drying is where a lot of the energy gets used, and the energy is what really drives up costs. So if you can modify your shoe press and increase the dryiness of the paper initially, you can really reduce energy costs. A lot of work going on with heat recovery. I didn't know much about pinch studies, but I've learned a little about them now. Basically, trying to look at the whole system, figure out where there's excess heat that's being wasted and where you need heat, and put those two activities together. Combined heat and power, some of our mills make electricity, generate electricity which they can sell to the grid. If they can use the heat that comes off of that generation in their process, that's, instead of heat being wasted, heat that's being used effectively. Heat pumps, just like you might use at home, the heat pumps can pull heat out of the wastewater and put it back into the mill where it's needed. Reuse of the hot front end water, the water in the head box, which is dirty, so traditionally it hasn't been reused, but it's got a lot of heat in it. So if you can clean that water up and reuse it, again, you can make great savings in energy. There's also a lot of activity, not so much in energy efficiency, but in changing the fuel mix. Many mills have been investing in biomass, in burning wastewater sludge, which traditionally has been very wet and difficult to burn, but again, if you can treat that and dry it enough so that you're getting a lot of heat value out of it, that's a great source of fuel. Tire-derived fuel, I know they're using that up at Skowhegan and other places. But many mills now either have or are converting to natural gas. The Woodland Mill converted about a year ago. Madison's about to get it within the next few weeks. Skowhegan, probably this spring. Many of our other mills already had natural gas. But those mills that have just installed natural gas are very relieved if they also gave themselves the ability to switch back and forth from natural gas to another fuel. I think you're doing this in Old Town.
We are.
Now that we've got the gas here, gas has been more expensive than oil for the last few weeks. And so if you have the ability to switch back to oil, that's great for the bottom line. In some cases, biomass is fairly cheap. You can generate electricity using it, but in other times, you can buy the electricity cheaper than you can generate it using biomass. So if you have the ability to switch back and forth between selling power or buying power, that's a real advantage. I'd already mentioned natural gas. Another thing that's happening a lot in the industry is demand response. When we have peak loads on the system, In Maine, it's largely due to cold weather systems, but it can also be due to heat in the summertime. The mills that take advantage of this have the ability to shut down a machine or shut down a process, perhaps their wood yard, and thereby reduce the load. And they can either get paid for that reduction by ISO New England, because that means that we don't need to build new power plants, or if they have the ability to sell power on the grid, they can sell power on the grid at the times when the prices are at their peak. And so for very short periods of time, that can be more profitable than making pulp or paper. Okay, and I want to finish with, really in the news, Kate Street Capital, a Great Northern paper, has the facility in Millinocket and East Millinocket that I mentioned earlier has been temporarily shut down. Kate Street has said that the ability to use this demand response to be able to get money out of the load reduction is the key to them reopening. But they have an agreement there, which was actually put in, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, where the mill in Millinocket is not, they don't own the power supply. The power supply is owned by Brookfield Power. They were all one entity at the time that this happened. And the legislature was worried that Brookfield was buying that only with the eye towards shutting down the paper side and just selling power. So they put in a law that says you can't just sell the power. And there's now a bill to try to change that law back so that they can benefit, the mill can benefit from power. But in this case, it would be power that they're not using. Since Kate Street and Great Northern don't own the power supply right now, when they shut down at times of high demand, Brookfield gets the benefit of that. And so this bill would allow, or would actually require, that instead Kate Street get the power from that, so that if the mill shuts down for demand response, they get the windfall of the extra dollars coming in. That bill just got filed yesterday. It was yesterday, maybe it was the day before. Anyway, there'll be a hearing on it next week, and I don't know what the fate is going to be for the people who are working at the mill. I hope something happens and the mill keeps running, but I'm not sure that the folks who own Brookfield are that excited about the legislature telling them how they have to have this power sharing agreement. So we'll see. I think that's going to be a lot of excitement over the next couple of weeks. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Donna who's next. Is that right?
Okay. Does the clicker work? Good morning. It's nice and cold in here, so that means no one's going to go to sleep, right? So that's positive. E2Tech. We decided to just, oh,
That works now.
perfect. Okay. Good morning. My name's Donna Accessi. I'm the mill manager at the Westbrook Mill, and I think today you're just going to be wowed by a 150-year-old mill that has come back and is really very, very strong. 1854, so this is a very old mill. We developed this release business I'm going to talk to you about in 1947. We were purchased by Scott, then we were purchased by Sappi. We shut down the pulp mill, as John talked about, and we buy our pulp actually mostly from the Skowhegan mill. We also buy from Irving in Canada, our softwood. And then in 2001, we restructured just to be release paper. So before then, we made all the graphic paper there as well. There's no way that we could compete. My paper machine at the mill is 1905. So that is not the kind of paper machine you want to compete against the best of the best, but it is an awesome machine to make what we make. The thing that is absolutely rivetingly important to our business is R&D. And I'm really proud to say that started by Warren and continued by Sappi, we continue to put a lot of investment in research and development. There's a building across the street from my mill. It houses over 40 scientists. About 12 of those are devoted to my business, the release business. The rest of them are printing and graphic. So we put our money where our mouth is. And actually we have a goal in our company, which is 20% of our revenues will come from products innovated in the last 5 years. So we're very serious about how important this is for us, and particularly in the release business, we've really had a lot of smashing successes. So you can see way back in 1881, the mill was the first coated two-sided paper in the world, to 1981 when we developed an ultracast process. So this is really key to our success. Sappi Warren is going to be known around the world as the leading source for functional textures. There is no paper in that comment, right? We do not sell paper, we sell texture. And I'm really happy to say that 40% of the entire world supply of release paper is made in Westbrook, Maine. Okay, so you guys go by the mill, or you see the big stack when you fly into Portland, you're kind of thinking, God, are they still open? But we're 40% of the world supply. Not too bad, huh? So what's release paper? I don't know if any of you had a chance to look at it. This is always very hard to explain, so I left these out. And if you looked at it, we basically make the paper at the bottom of here, and it's got a texture to it. And what I'd like to say to people is it's a mold. That's all it is. And so it's got a texture. The people we sell it to pour vinyl or polyurethane on top of that, and then they peel it away, so hence the release paper. And they put a backing cloth on it, and then they would sell it to the factory who makes Nike sports shoes, and they would take this little piece and sew that there. So the paper isn't in the final product, it is the mold, and it's reused multiple times. So if you're in China, where you don't get paid very much, they would expect to get 80 reuses out of that paper. If you're in Europe, where you care very much about quality, you're very much into the high fashion, labor is expensive, you might get 6 or 7 uses. And so part of our product attribute is really how much it's used. Factory workers in China get paid based on reuse, and so they give us feedback on how we are on that. So to kind of explain it in a little bit more detail, so the bottom is cellulose paper, kind of paper that you would see anywhere. That's made on my 1905 paper machine. Then we put it over a coater, and so that coating is very special, so think about coating like paint. In the graphic industry, it's more likely to have clays, and you're talking about printing on it. Really important for us is basically silicone, so that will release when we need it to. So very specialty coatings put on there, and this is where it goes from kind of the ridiculous to the sublime. So we start in this old, centuries-old paper machine, and the way we put the coatings on and we cure it is with electron beams. So very, very high tech. So this is not your grandfather's paper mill. If you walked into that area, people are wearing jackets, suits, it's humidity controlled, climate controlled, everything like that. So very old technology to start with, very innovative technology on the end. Very simply, we make 2 different kinds of products for release. Classic embossing, the print quality or the texture is actually put on with an engraved roll, and it's mechanically pressed into that paper. So you've got paper, you've got coating, now you're pressing the texture into it against a backing roll. And the fidelity is not that great. It's only around 50% because you're mechanically deforming that paper, it comes outside of that nip, and it isn't equal. But despite that, very high margin paper that we do on that part of the business. Ultracast is the one that we cure with electron beam, and that is 100% fidelity. So very, very high value product. That product is worth 10 times what a printing and publishing paper would be worth. So that's pretty much the process that we use. A little bit about the casters, so that's who we might sell our paper to. They take the paper on the left-hand side, the release paper unwind. They put that coating on, the urethane or the vinyl. They put it through an oven, then they're going to put a backing cloth on. And then at the very end, you're going to see the stripping station. So they're taking their product and winding it up on one side. They're going to send that to the Nike shoe factory. And then the paper goes on the other side and then is reused again multiple times. Okay, now I'm not clicking the right way. Okay, got it. We operate 2 businesses at the Westbrook Mill. One is the release paper, and I mentioned we're 40% of the world's supply. The other is power sales. Because we've downsized over the years from a very big facility, part of how we make our money at Westbrook is power sales, so very important to the viability of the mill. Energy-wise, 82% of the power generated comes from renewable resources. We sell renewable energy credits. Biomass is about half of our fuel. CDW is construction demolition waste, so rather than putting that in the landfill, we burn that. Coal is about 18%, and then hydro is 21%. We actually own 6 hydroelectric dams that start up at Sebago Lake, and the last one is in downtown Westbrook. And I see Matt here, who spends all kinds of times with me talking about the things, right? So global sales, I want to talk about that a minute. I think the most important thing is go to the right-hand side here. 46% of our sales are in China. Okay, so for all those of you who love to hate China, bringing stuff over here, we love China. China is our business. That's where we make a lot of our money. China is garments, it's sports shoes, and handbags. So they're what's called the casting end of the business. If you look at Europe, which is also fairly big, 29% of our business is there. Laminates, so think about pergo flooring, think about any kind of laminate that you might have, and upholstery primarily for automotive. Very big, particularly in Germany. A couple weeks ago, I spent a week in Germany, actually spending a lot of time with the automotive industry and with engraving of the rolls that we use to make the texture. North America is only about 10%, and engineered surfaces, lots of different kinds of uses. I'll show you a couple products in a few minutes. And Mexico, commercial upholstery, a lot for the automotive business. And Brazil, we call them white shoes, or like sneakers and athletic shoes, brown shoes are all the rest of them. Very big in Brazil. The Brazilian women love to buy shoes. We love Brazilian women. So we sell a whole lot of material to Brazil. We are absolutely a global company. We have got people all over the world. You can see the folks at a meeting. We do a lot of trade shows. Again, when I was in Germany a couple weeks ago, we did a 2-day trade show on the laminates. We have trade shows over in Asia and Brazil. So we've got a wide group of people working for us. So some interesting facts. We sell in 57 countries. This one I find fascinating. Some of our product goes by commercial airlines. So our product is so valuable and our customers want it so badly sometimes that literally they'll call up and they'll pay to fly it. And I always assumed it was like a cargo plane, right? And then I found out from the guy who does our logistics that like Delta Airlines flying to Shanghai, if they don't have a lot of overweight people on the flight, I guess, throw in a couple of our rolls in the back, and that's how they arrive. So think about a paper product that people are going to fly to on Delta Airlines. And the other one, which is kind of fascinating as well, is for our European business, and I mentioned that was about 1/3 of our business, a shift in 1 cent in the exchange rate is equal to us losing $300,000 or making $300,000 more in a year. So that could be several $million on our bottom line. Bad news could be several $1 million on our bottom line. Good news. So I can tell you I get in a lot of trouble when it's bad news, but we love the exchange rate, which is up very favorable right now. So our products. Let's talk about that for a few minutes. And you're going to say, geez, I can't believe this stuff is actually paper. Sorry. So first is soccer balls, okay? So we have actually made the pattern in the past for World Cup soccer balls. So texture is very, very important. This particular one was made in Brazil. Nike, I keep talking about them. We've actually done a lot of work with Nike, and we go direct end user selling there. So we go to Nike and we make them their own pattern. So we work with the designers, and this particular pattern, a high quality professional sports shoe, this actually not only has a pattern that people like, but it actually can kick the ball further because it grips it better. So that's the kind of end user selling we're doing. We're actually working on the design to have it be functional. The next one we'll talk about, and you're never going to feel the same way about genuine leather. So this is like heartbreaking news for you, so pay attention. So you go and you buy your genuine leather seats in your car, and you're kind of pretty puffed up. These are genuine leather. Or you go out and you buy the genuine leather shoes, right? And you're feeling pretty darn good about that. Well, think about it. All genuine leather is split grain leather, okay? So split grain is pretty ugly. So how do they make it look nice? They take our paper. So this is split grain leather, and they pour the vinyl on top, and then they put our paper on it, which in this case doesn't have a texture. It's just flat, and it makes a nice shine, and then they pull the paper away. Okay, so unless you buy top grain leather, you are buying synthetic leather over regular leather. So sorry to disappoint you. I know you're all disappointed, but I wanted to let you know. I mentioned also that, well, here's another one I've always got to. This is a North American product, actually. This is made by Freeform, and this is designer glass. So this is actually in Lincoln Center. It's in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and kind of hides some things. And so we actually make the pattern that's going on the outside of this. So this is kind of another interesting one. I talked about innovation. That's very, very important to us. And so we worked with a factory over in Germany, and they wanted us to help them go from a 5 manufacturing process step to 3. And so we did something we've never done before. We actually did our pattern on film. Okay, so when you start to get to film products, this is worth like 30 times, the normal amount of regular paper. And so this is something really new for us. We worked with our R&D group. We were able to take that wood grain design and put it on film. The factory, or the company that we worked for in Germany, they actually built a brand new factory in Poland in order to make this product using our process. So very exciting stuff. And again, you're kind of getting the sense that we also work with the end user. And the next one, let's see, is car wrapping. How great is that, huh? So you too could have your car wrapped, and I want mine wrapped. I keep saying to my boss, please, can I have my car wrapped and cover the rust? But he hasn't bought that yet. So anyway, we're making a design. This is a carbon fiber design that you can wrap your entire car in. And this is not that big in the United States, so if you want to be the first person on your block to do this, you could be a trendsetter. Very big in Europe. If you go on YouTube and you type in car wrapping, you'll see people with brand new Bentleys and Lamborghinis being car wrapped. Why do they do it? They get to customize it. They get to customize the color. This is kind of a cool pattern right here that they can use. And it's about $2,000 for the car, and you can actually take it off at some point in time, and then I guess the surface underneath looks good. But this is really big. I talked to a guy in Brazil who's making this, and he said that they're also now starting to wrap buildings out in Las Vegas. So the headliner is actually getting wrapped around the building, which I really love because that's a lot more paper I can sell than I can in a car. So we're doing so you're amazed, right? Do you go by the Westbrook Mill? You didn't know how sexy we were, huh? So I'm going to end really on the shoot, I almost forgot so you're thinking like synthetic leather. This is like, oh my God, this is like junk. I'm not buying synthetic leather. So our marketing guy was in New York, and we're always looking, so we go to a lot of fashion design shows. We go to Italy, we go all over the place looking for ideas. So anyway, this is from the Gucci flagship store on 5th Avenue. This Gucci jacket, which sells for $800, was made from paper made in Westbrook, Maine. Okay, so this is not the Payless shoe kind of stuff, although we're happy to sell them paper too. But this shows you the kind of quality and the kind of thin kind of fabric that you can make from this paper. Okay, so we'll end up with environmental stuff. In terms, I mentioned about the hydros. We've got 6 hydroelectric dams that help us produce energy. We put a lot of money, well over $100,000 at this point in time, into recreational facilities so that people can portage around the dam, that they can go fishing, bridges, those kinds of things. So we put a lot of investment there. We just recently completed the Cumberland Mills Fishway. That was a $4.5 million investment in order for fish to come up the Presumpscot, so I wanted to talk about that. In the lower left-hand corner, you can see renewable energy. SAPI Westbrook is 84% renewable energy. If you take a look at our industry, the paper industry is about 65% renewable energy. John talked a little bit about that. And then on a national average, 8% is renewable. So that's not only pretty good news for our industry, but also good news for all of us in general that we're that energy conscious. Okay, so the end, we really are committed. I'll kind of summarize that R&D. That is SAPI's DNA, is to spend money there, and that's why we're so successful. The Westbrook Mill, experienced and creative workforce, and I would just want to take a second to talk about that. We have a 40-year club in our mill. This year I inducted 18 people into the 40-year club, just this year. I have 41 people in the 40-year club out of a group of 340 people. So there's a long heritage. People's father, their grandfathers worked there. Now I'll tell you the flip side of the story. We're all thinking about jobs in the state of Maine. You talked about jobs and high-paying jobs. Last year I hired 10% of my workforce was hired last year, okay? So 10%. The average wage of someone walking into my mill as a craftsman or operating on the paper machine without college education is $60,000 a year plus great benefits, okay? So this is an awesome business, and this is, the paper industry is alive. It's growing, and we've got to figure out our way to do it in a very different way than we did 20 or 30 years ago, whether we're in the graphics business or in the specialty business. We can make money, we can provide jobs, we can be great employers in the community. Thank you.
Yeah, Dick Arnold was hoping to be here. He's our president and CEO of Red Shield Acquisition, but he had some things, business things that came up early in the week and that are going into the rest of the week. So he kind of drafted me to come down and speak to this group. You know, I've presented this presentation or similar presentations a few times now publicly. So really, my objective here today is to help you understand the innovation that is going on in Old Town Fuel and Fiber. It's very unique in the world today. There are other people competing with us, but we believe we're at this point ahead of the curve in terms of the innovation from wood to sugar. Just so everybody understands, we're actually Red Shield Acquisition doing business as Old Town Fuel and Fiber. And really what I want to focus on, and there's some information in here about the mill and what we do today from the pulp mill side, but I really want to focus on the biorefinery so everybody can understand, you know, what we're doing, why we're doing it, and where we are today. In a nutshell, from a 10,000 foot level, you can see our process here. Basically, it's a modified craft cooking process. John had mentioned earlier, this is basically bring in chips, we actually cook them, adding chemicals and heat and time, and we produce this modified sugar pulp that we call it, the sugar brown stock. And that sugar brown stock is then put through the sugar process where basically, as it comes out of pulp, it's washed, where you're actually separating up the lignin and the black liquor, and then moving forward you have cellulose, hemicellulose. Now cellulose, hemicellulose are basically complex sugars. And those complex sugars can be broken down into monomeric simple sugars. And those monomeric simple sugars, once cleaned up, can then be fermented to a variety of different products. And essentially that's what we're doing. Our project that we have going right now, it's a cooperative award with the DOE. They're a very good partner of ours. They're very supportive, have been supportive. We've gone through 2 different sugar processes. The original one was technically viable, but it was not economically viable. We kind of switched gears midstream, and then the process that we developed and protected today is actually both technically and economically viable. We're at a point now where we've made over 100 tons of sugar and sold it to the industry that uses sugar for fermentation. We still make sugar today. We can make sugar today. And basically, but our process that, kind of go through this through the presentation, but essentially the project right now is to, ultimately the primary product will be cellulosic ethanol. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our sugar, we're gonna ferment it to a cellulosic ethanol. Now there are other byproducts as a result of the fermentation and the cleanup process after the fermentation. There's a single cell protein yeast that's actually produced that we take out of the process and actually becomes an animal feed. Ahead of the ethanol process, our future, we believe strongly, is in what we call clean monomeric cellulosic sugar. That's a cleaner sugar than an ethanol sugar, and that sugar can be upgraded to biochemicals, bioplastics, carbon fiber, a number of different things. So that's basically the project today as it stands, is the cellulosic ethanol. Getting into some of the mill so everybody understands, but we're basically a bioenergy campus. We're configured for the alternative renewable energy development. We use University of Maine's FBRI Technology Research Center. We have OTFS pilot and analytical and technical services. There's a lot of synergies between the two. The University of Maine really does many different smaller versions of bioprocesses. We do one bioprocess at a much larger scale. So if someone wants to go over there and do a biological biorefinery process, they can start over there and then they can evolve and develop over to where we are basically on the same site. We have a biomass boiler. We're integrated into the ISO New England markets for a qualified status. Additional generating capacity with a 9.5 megawatt gas turbine, which we actually don't run. We don't need it for the mill today, but it's an option. And we participate in the rec market. All things that are vital for really energy consciousness and really economic energy effectiveness, you know. So on the pulping side, we're a relatively small pulp mill. We're probably in the lower 25% quartile in terms of pulp production. We make about 550 tons a day of pulp, about 200,000 tons a year. We have a variety of customers around the nation. We try to focus on domestic pulp. Some innovative things going on the pulp side. You know, we're trying to do some very innovative things over there to help, just really help the market and help the price point of our pulp. You know, we have pre-extraction and acid recovery IP and technology. This was technology that was developed jointly with the University of Maine. It was basically what we call a C5 or xylose-rich sugar process. And we also have the C6-rich sugar process, which is really wholly developed and wholly owned by Old Town Fuel and Fiber. And we focus on, you know, maintaining high-quality fiber, simultaneously producing feedstock for the biorefinery. So basically, once we make the pulp, it can either go to pulp for paper, or it can go to sugar pulp for sugar and for other bioproducts. The vision of Old Town and Patriot Partners is actually our owner, our parent company. The goal, long-term viability and sustainable jobs. It's always been Patriot and Lynn Tilton's goal. Along with that is fiber security, low-cost position across the board. Innovation, technology development. We don't have the staff, the time, the people to really focus on deep-rooted research. So we really call it little r, big D. And little r, big D, I for you know, small research development and innovation. You know, it's a fail, fast forward type mentality where you keep trying until you fail, and then back up, reevaluate, and keep trying. So it's really speed to development, speed to market, and also energy independence is important for the location. The vision is really creating value through utilization of the existing infrastructure. This is really the core of the technology as it stands today, is that our technology really relies on the existing pulping business. We utilize existing assets that are in the ground that are either not being utilized or underutilized, and that really feeds into our technology. So, you know, everybody should always be wanting to create an environment of continuous improvement. That's very important for every business. Focus on efficient and economically viable operations, given the high cost of wood in the Northeast. You know, we're competing with, you know, really the Southeast and South America, for example, where the wood costs are much more attractive. You know, development and demonstration of a technically and economically viable biofuel process that converts wood to jet fuel. You know, I mentioned that we're going to cellulosic ethanol, but that can be upgraded to jet fuel if the market would bear it. The problem is ethanol and jet fuel run about the same cost, so there's no real business. There's really no business advantage to doing that. Pursue opportunities for growth that create value and diversity. You know, when you make one product and it's pulp, you really open yourself up to a lot of issues in terms of just from a business perspective. You know, you really fall in the typical trend of pulping and paper. And really the goal at Old Town is to diversify the product portfolio and make some new products and really use the facility in a way that creates a lot more value for us. You know, and obviously operate a green, efficient energy platform, reduce greenhouse gas emissions and carbon footprint. And it's important for us to create what we call a center of excellence for developing technologies and intellectual property in the area of bioenergy. And this really ties in with the University of Maine FBRI, the TRC that's on Old Town Fuel and Fiber site, in our pilot plant, and how that builds into the you know, the intellectual property portfolio. This is our technology tree. This is something that we put together. They're trying to do a marketing tool, and so everybody can kind of understand what our technology is. But when you look at the tree, basically, when you look at the roots, that's what's in place today. You know, you have project management, you have skilled labor, you have a wood basket, you know how to manage the wood sustainably. You have the wood deconstruction assets, which is the pulping. You have waste treatment, you have water source, energy platform, and infrastructure. So you have all these things that allow you to build a brownfield sugar facility. The trunk of the tree, our core technology, has always been a development from wood to cellulosic sugar. You know, we never really had the intention to go beyond cellulosic sugar. Our intention was to go up to cellulosic sugar and then partner with third parties to go beyond that in terms of fermentation, upgrading to higher value products. And as you grow up the tree, really what you're doing is you're building more and more value. The pilot plant, which we've been through, we've done it, was used to really validate the technology, provide service or revenue. We've actually worked with several different companies to take their feedstock, and it was not always wood, but to take their cellulosic feedstock and actually make a cellulosic sugar from it that they could then use to make a high value product. Technology development and biotech services, you know, it was just part of the whole building of the technology. We started essentially with virtually nothing other than university's assistance, and we actually built this process from the start, beginning in 2009. And now we are actually doing sugar testing for other sugar companies, you know, so it's just a matter of developing that technology and developing that service for the outside market. What the pilot work does is it basically allowed us to collect all the matrix that feeds into the demonstration pro forma. Basically, if we were able to do it at pilot, and you carry that information forward to the demonstration, then this is how you're going to actually perform at a demonstration scale. So what we're going through right now is we're actually in the demo phase, or in an initial part of the demo phase. We've gone through a number of different engineering phases, and we're actually at a point now where we're actually permitting for the demo facility. You know, and then the goal then is to use the demo. Once you get the demo facility started up operating, then you use those matrix to feed into the commercial one stage. You know, and the commercial one stage may be cellulosic ethanol, it may be a number of other things. It depends on how the technology evolves and the partners that want to get involved. And really, at the end of the day, the whole when you look at the venture capitalists and you talk to them and you read all the books, you begin to realize that you don't really start to see the real high value until you get to commercial two. You know, so someone has to take the risk to build this technology to a point of commercial two, and then that's really when it takes off from a value perspective. So, you know, our sustainability, obviously safety culture, safety is always first. Our environmental stewardship, conservation, and sustainability. You can read through a number of these, but basically, you know, we participate in FSC, Sustainable Forestry Initiative, Chain of Custody certification. Traceability for the sugar, it's important for the cellulosic sugar industry since it's a new emerging industry. We need to be able to quickly and accurately demonstrate from wood to sugar where the sugar has come from and how it was produced and when it was produced and all these number of different things, you know. So, and really the last one, which may be one of the most important ones, is the strategic partnerships. In this industry, emerging technology, really it's very, very unlike the pulp and paper industry. When, you know, I grew up in the pulp and paper industry. I spent 20 years before coming to this project in the pulp and paper industry. And if I had an issue, there was always somebody else I could call. You know, I pick up the phone, I've got this issue, what do you think? Bounce it off them, they'd come back with several ideas. When we're doing this, a very unique, first of a kind process, there's no one else to talk to. You're basically on an island. So what you need to do is you need to sort of pool your resources and develop these strategic partnerships, which become very important for your just moving forward and your future success. Just quickly, our technology pathways. I mentioned some of these earlier, but we have the pre-extraction of hemicellulose, which was the University of Maine, initially University of Maine developed, and then we jointly developed the cleaning up part of the sugar. That gives us the C5-rich sugars that fermented the biobutanol, upgrading the biojet. In this process, as I told you, was technically viable, but economically it just didn't add up. It didn't make any sense, you know, and it was high capex and opex. Basically, we were at $24 a gallon of oil, of gasoline substitute. in 36-cent sugar. This is just way out of line economically. We knew this probably by the end of 2010, early 2011. We knew that we were going to have problems with the economics as we started to develop all the technical matrix. We quickly changed gears and went into C6 rich sugars. Initially focused on algal fermentation, which is really a recommendation from the Department of Energy. That again just didn't make sense more because of the the fermentation and upgrading expenses that went along with it. Then, as we evolved, we actually evolved back into cellulosic ethanol, because cellulosic ethanol is a known process, it's a developed process, and it can make economic sense. So. Second generation clean sugars, that's our core value. We've always known that, we've always been very clear about that. We believe we have to be comparable with corn dextrose in the United States. Low sugar cost, this is really the play with biomass. There's several different plays, this is one of the major ones. 10 to 15 cent range per pound, commercially viable. CapEx, if you repurpose a pulp mill, we're at about a $4 range as benchmark. It's basically $4 based on an annual production of ethanol in this case. So if you have a 50 million gallon a year ethanol plant, you're in the $60 million range for CapEx. Plastics, chemicals, and carbon fibers, they're really our future, and we're doing in a parallel path along with the ethanol facility. We're doing development in that area to ferment to a product that then can be upgraded to a variety of chemicals and plastics and carbon fiber. The value of technology, very telling chart here. We're playing down into pulp production. You can see down in the I guess it's a red block. Energy, pulp production, those are our two real main products right now. And then if you look at just cellulosic sugar, you're not going to make any money by just making cellulosic sugar. Everybody wants it cheaper. Everybody wants it on a dry basis. It's just not a practical play. But when you couple this technology with the third-party fermentation upgrading, then you start seeing some value from it, and you start seeing the biofuel, all the way to biochemical, all the way up to the carbon fiber process play. So really what it does is if you can make anything other than pulp and then use the sugar to make a bioproduct, you're diversifying your portfolio in a positive way. So this is really bridging the gap to value, and what that means is how do we go from ethanol to the higher value products. Everybody will ask, why are you making ethanol? It's the lowest value bioproduct there is to make. Well, it's established technology, it's low risk, a number of different reasons that we do this. And this is the first of a kind, so we believe that we can only have so many miracles in one process. So if we can, can really solve the fermentation upgrading part of the process, focus on the sugar part of the process, and then get to the next commercial step. That's really the way to go. We have proven technology for producing clean cellulosic sugars from wood for conversion to biofuels, bioplastics, biochemicals. I think we've actually tested on 20 different technology platforms. In every case, we've performed at least as well as what the competitive sugar was in that case. Whether they were competing with cane or corn, we always were at least as well performing as they were. And we believe the sugar, from a quality perspective, is clean enough to ferment anything. It's just a matter of what's the next step. But the steps to commercialization beyond the demo over the next several years is you've got to have a logical pathway that really demonstrates the technology. That's where we're going with the ethanol project. You incorporate the model that maximizes profitability, manages debt and capital. There are several people out there that are interested to taking our sugar and upgrading it to higher value chemicals, plastics, and beyond. But they're not really willing to take the risk from where we are today to go into commercial where they want to be. So by doing a demo, that will actually demonstrate to them that it's a viable option. Continuation of the technology development to higher value conversion technology in products. This really involves strategic partners and commercial deployment of a strategy that includes the viability of bolt-on technology, licensing and repurposing pulp mills. You know, there's dozens of mills across the country, across the US and Canada, that could actually use, that are either shuttered completely or partially shuttered, or have excess capacity that could use this technology, actually bolt it onto their existing process and give them an option to be profitable. This I don't want to spend a lot of time with, but basically what it demonstrates is you go from ethanol, it can be upgraded to a number of different things, and you can see biojet, bio-PET, which is a form of plastic, biochemicals, and so on. Just an idea, our project, the plan is to produce about between 13 and 14 million gallons a year of ethanol. It's a very small percentage in the New England region, so it'll be blended locally, and it'll be used locally, so. We have to meet all specs of current ethanol, corn ethanol, cane ethanol. There's only one spec for every ethanol, so we have to make sure we meet the same spec. Food versus fuel, this is really one of our big advantages. Wood is not a food, so the corn, the cane, they'll always have that against them. This is actually a nice piece of work that was done by Lux Research. It was not commissioned by us. It was actually presented at a conference I was at a couple of years ago. I asked the Lux researcher if he'd be willing to allow us to share this publicly, and he said yes, you can share it as long as you put our name on it. So that's why the Lux Research logo is up there. But basically, there's a lot of detail here, but the whole gist of this work was to say that wood really is the most efficient growing, the most plentiful cellulosic plant product on the planet. This in wood, there's lots of it. It's regionally located, which could be a positive or negative. It's actually positive in the pulping business, but it far trumps cane, sugar beet, corn, all these other cellulosic crops. And the whole point is that as these fermentation platforms grow, as there's more and more bioplastic, biochemicals, cellulosic ethanol, then eventually, sooner or later, they're going to have to start eating into the whole wood basket. And start using wood versus using the softer cellulosics like the corn or the cane. So. Quickly did a market capacity study. We looked at the capacity in North America of chemical pulp. This is chemical pulp that could be converted to sugar. 62 million tons a year between the US and Canada, and if we were able to repurpose 10% of that capacity, that'd be close to 12.5 billion pounds of sugar per year. This would cover about 30% of the RFS2 required ethanol over the next 5 years. So there's lots of capacity there in the pulping form. It's just a matter of the direction we go in. I think this is the last slide, but just to kind of put a plug in for our technical services. When I started in Old Town on this project in 2009, we didn't have any, not only did we not have any testing capability, we didn't have any capability at all, right? We depended wholly on the university and others to do our development work. Well, as you evolve, you realize you need certain core equipment to do this. You need certain talent to do this. You need to grow a team that can actually develop this technology. And what we've done now is we have basically we have a lab, we have a pilot plant, we have the luxury of having a mill right beside the pilot plant where we can make really an infinite amount of feedstock for the pilot plant and for development work, which is unusual for these development projects. So we have all these synergies, and we've actually come a long way in the last, say, 4 years in developing the capability to develop this technology. So that's it.
Good. Thanks, panelists. I think we have time for a few questions. We've got 15 minutes or so. Anybody have questions? Yes, right here. Yes.
Hi, my name is Chuck Hardenberg. I write a newsletter called Atlantic Northeast Rails and Ports. So my question's about railroads. If I'm an operator of the railroads in Maine at this point, I'm looking at the number of mills that is shrinking, and I'm wondering, gee, will I still be able to make a major portion of my revenue from serving paper mills? So I'd like to ask the industry representatives here, do you see your use of rail increasing, decreasing, remaining the same? How do you see your use of railways in the future?
I'll just start. We use very little rail. We have some raw materials come in for rail, but not very much. Most, as you saw my China and Europe story, pretty much the most of the product is picked up by truck in containers and goes down to New York City and moves out that way. So very little of our operation is or will be rail dependent.
In Old Town, the rail use will actually go up considerably, 30, 40% probably at least, on both ends of the process. To keep the cost of woody biomass down, it's going to have to be rail from the really northern Maine down to the facilities that are near us to be processed. So we see a lot more rail in the future for that aspect. On the other end, we're still going to be continuing to make the same amount of pulp as we make today. So that's not going to go away. And on the other side, on the ethanol almost exclusively is shipped by rail, just because of the way the blending is done and all this other stuff. So our plan is for not 100% exclusive, but probably 90+% of that will be shipped by rail. So all that ethanol that we produce will go out. The 13, 14 million gallons a year will go by rail, and that's new business, right? So.
Yes.
From a woodlot owner's perspective, what species would you encourage us to develop and grow?
For Old Town,
Yes, for cellulose and sugars.
hardwood is the easiest, highest percentage of sugar that would be our preferred. In any maple is really what we built the technology around. However, it's still almost as efficient on softwood, and it's as efficient on a softwood hardwood blend. What we're planning to do and what our development work has all been based on is a 75% hardwood, 25% softwood mix. And really, the species on hardwood or species on softwood doesn't really matter. It's much different than the pulp and paper industry, and that's where I don't want to say we struggled, but we had to kind of flip things over a little bit and look at it a little differently, because you don't have the same constraints when making pulp for paper as you do in making pulp for sugar. It's much more forgiving. You have some opportunity for increase in yield and these type of things, and we've tested the technology against some very aggressive feedstocks, and for non-disclosure reasons, I can't explain what they were, but they weren't wood, but I can only say they were very aggressive, and the technology works, and I believe it'll work on any species globally, so.
Good question. Yes, right in the middle.
Christopher, thinking about that first slide that we had up with the candles hanging the light bulb, what was the experience like inside Sappi as they originally considered moving away from the products that you built the company on into these more innovative spaces with what I'm assuming is a pretty expensive capital investment in equipment when you weren't sure how long you were going to be there? What was that transition like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, again, because we have an innovative, where are we going to be in 5 years versus the product, and the Westbrook Mill, for the people involved, and I'll start with that because I'm all about the people. We used to have 3,000 people at the mill. We have 330 today. So that's pretty rough, right? A lot of people, lost jobs from the heyday to that transition. But we were never going to be able to compete against the Somersets of the world and the Chinese paper machines and those kinds of things. So I really applaud our leadership for saying, where do we go with this great asset, right? We've got plenty of good things about the mill in terms of experience, in terms of the research and development, in terms of being the wood basket, in terms of being in Portland, and really saying that what we've got to do is take out the pulp mill. We're never going to be efficient, and we're going to have to spend a huge amount of money. So I would say that it was less about the capital. Again, I got my 1905 paper machine. A lot of capital put in for the electron beam technology, that kind of thing, but really a commitment that we were going to be in a business that would have high margins, and that's really what has saved Westbrook, is an ability, on a good day, I make 125 tons of paper on my paper machine, which everyone in the paper industry would just start laughing, and I'm okay with that because I make money. But Somerset, for example, would be just under 3,000 tons a day. So you've really got to kind of be in a very different mind frame, and we are not tons of or us mentality. We live on the edge of our capability every single day. When you talk about the chemistries in printing and publishing, frankly, it's pretty simple. You put ink on paper. I'm dealing with Chinese people who decide every day that maybe methyl acetate would help them run faster, so they throw it on my paper, and if it doesn't work, they come back and say, your paper is no good. If I changed my chemistry on the coating, the guys in Brazil would be ready to shoot me. So in terms of the chemistry and the technical, we are very intensive around that, and in a way less so from the manufacturing. But I really have a lot of pride in, and I'll just quickly, maybe infomercial, but I think it's important, is Sappi as a business is saying, if we're going to be in the graphics business, we're going to be the low-cost producer, a la Somerset, okay? We are going to be the best machines in the world. We're going to be in the specialty business, which would be me and a couple other mills in the company, but they don't have anything to do with release paper. We're going to be in high-margin businesses. And then the third leg of the strategy is dissolving pulp. So many of you may have read we spent $170 million at our mill in Cloquet, Minnesota, to convert that from a kraft pulp mill to dissolving pulp mill, which is very high value on pulp. You know, it's kind of similar story. So we're diversifying and spending a lot of capital in a lot of different areas to say we're going to be a business that's still going to be around, you know, in the 20 or 30 years. And it takes a lot of guts, and it does take capital investment to do that.
Yes, right here.
I'm Whit Richardson with the Bangor Daily News. Obviously Old Town Fuel Fiber, Sappi, both shown examples of how to use the existing resources infrastructure to find profitable markets. But what about the rest of the mills that John talked about that are still in commodity businesses with newsprint or coated paper? What's the path forward for them? Do they just continue along in those commodity markets, or has Sappi shown maybe a pathway?
Well, I think
haven't other mills taken your R&D approach and tried to find new niche products that are profitable?
Yeah, I can't answer that, but one thing I will answer, I think it's important, is so the Somerset mill is not going to be a mill that just continues on, hoping for the best to the last ton of paper sold. There's always going to be tons of paper sold, and we are going to be the best quality and the most efficient and the most inexpensive source. And so Sappi is committed to the paper business, and Somerset's just one example. I could take examples in Europe and in South Africa, where in those businesses where we choose to stay in the graphics part of the business, we are going to be the best, and we are going to be the least cost. So I think it's you've really got to kind of rethink where your strategy is. If you're going to stay in that kind of business, you've got to also make the commitment to invest and not just say, well, we've invested, we'll just see what's going to happen, over the next 20 years.
Right, because Maine mills are known for having old paper machines, like you said. They're older mills. Maine are competing against these dozens of new mills in China and newer mills in other parts of the country. So we're talking about the future of the paper industry in Maine. Besides the example of Sappi, what's the future for the other mills that are in commodities?
You've got the Sappi mill in Skowhegan, which is the newest mill in Maine, and one of the newest mills in North America. And Jay is another relatively new big mill. Those mills are probably going to compete well in the coated paper market. And we do make better coated paper than any place else. That's largely our fiber and our workers in the mills. Some of the other mills, in East Millinocket, for example, they tried to get into a market. They were making telephone directory. That's not a great market to be in these days. So they tried to convert to making financial statement paper, really thin paper, because of the cost of mail. You want paper that you can read, but it doesn't cost a fortune to ship these things out. Well, even that's being hurt by digital equipment, or digital challenges. So I think that type of older machine that was built around 1900, that facility, they're just going to have to find new products. I don't know what those are, but I think you kind of have a choice. If you have bigger, newer machines, we still compete quite well. If you have older machines, you've really got to go into some sort of niche market. I gave the example of the Lincoln tissue thing. These aren't deep dyed, but you know, who would have thought that that would keep that facility going, but it has.
You know, just to quickly answer your question and how it diversify a mill, you know, you looked at the 62 million tons of pulp capacity in North America, much of that was from Maine, you know, and much of that capacity would actually fit Old Town Fuel and Fibers technology. So maybe part of the answer is for these facilities that have these small machines, maybe a mix of small, newer machines, big newer machines, and even with that all running, they're only running at 2/3 or 3/4 pulp capacity. You know, for a pulp mill to be truly efficient, it has to run at 100%. You have to have your recovery loop running at 100%. You know, and if anything less than that, you're really, energy efficiency really takes a big hit. So in order to do that, and some of these mills that are losing paper production capacity for whatever reason, can you know, sort of diversify that with an OTFF type technology or another type of technology like that that's bolt on, and keep their mills at 100% capacity on the pulping liquor loop side. You know, so that's maybe part of the answer, you know, and I think it's tough for people to really have the you know, the foresight to see R&D and where it fits in. You got to be patient, I think, with R&D, and you can probably answer that better than anybody, but.
We do a lot of projects that never pan out.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, and if you're not failing, you're not innovating, you know, so to me, it's got to be a combination of diversification and innovation, you know, so.
Yeah, way in the back.
Donna, you had mentioned that, I think you said 10% of your workforce was hired within the last year or two. Were you able to fill that with graduates of Maine colleges and universities, or did you have to import people from outside of Maine?
Yeah, great question. Different answer for salaried versus an operator or a craftsman in the mill, right? So for craftsmen, that is difficult to hire right now. There's not a lot of high school kids who decide they want to be a piper when they grow up anymore, unfortunately, or a mechanical worker. And we're actually doing a huge amount of work with high schools right now to try to help them understand that, geez, going to a 2-year technical school and then coming out and getting $60,000 plus a year is a probably pretty good alternative to going to a liberal arts college and, you know, underworking when you get out. So that is certainly a challenge. Electricians is also a challenge because there's a lot of businesses competing against that. Our demographic is really old, so we've got lots of, you know, people retiring. From a salaried perspective, it's a mix. We hire a lot of chemies. We hire a lot of people from Maine Maritime, those kinds of things. So I'd say that a lot of people are Maine workers. We do go out, you know, and actually in our case, I'm ready to make a job offer today to somebody in Germany to help me with my engraving work. So we're all over the place. But the biggest concern to me is getting young people, and more importantly, their parents, to understand that there is some great work out there and that it's innovative work. And so we're actually taking our 20-something craftsmen and they're going into the high schools and saying, it's fun to work in a paper mill. You know, we get to have new ideas. Someone gives us a problem, we get to solve it. So we've got our own work to do to really convince people that, again, this isn't your father's factory anymore, that there's a lot of independence, there's a lot of creativity, there's a lot in every single job that we have.
Yeah, Jim?
This isn't strictly speaking pulp and paper, but they compete for basically the same feedstock. Another emerging technology is torrefied wood. That's kind of a niche market for Europe at this point, but who knows in the future. Regulations come up, it might become more widespread. Potentially a profitable alternative for application of trees from Maine. Do you look at those guys as being in the same club, or do you look at them as basically being competition, or what do you think about that?
I'll just speak for myself. We've got a recovery boiler that's down, so we get people like that coming to our mill all the time saying, hey, Donna, you know, we can come here too. I think the business model is not as evolved, and what we would have to take a look at, frankly, is I use biomass to run my own energy, so we've got to make sure that we don't get, particularly being in southern Maine, right? You're in an area where there's a lot of wood. I've got a lot of ocean, unfortunately, and a lot of people don't cut wood. So I've always got to take a look at it, is there enough wood in the basket to supply both? But I think, for example, in torrefaction, we're just not really ready for commercial.
Yeah, our perspective is that pulp and paper, torrefied wood, pellets, and us, we're all in the same game. I don't, excuse me, I don't think any one of those is going to be the complete solution. And I think we made a mistake, it just was evolution of the industry, but we were very specialized in pulp and paper for decades, right? And we thought we would be for centuries probably, and now we're kind of getting caught, and we need to sort of rethink this, and I think having a diversification of the wood products industry is going to be healthy in the long run. Have a good competition, and it's just going to be pulp and paper versus pulp and paper. It's going to be all these sort of competing in a healthy way, so.
But highest value, I think that's also
Highest
important,
value
is you've
ends
really
up
got to
with-
take a look at the wood. So if we're turning wood into, I hate to say it, wood pellets, and that could have made pulp or
That's
could have
right.
made a higher value product, I have a real concern about that.
Yeah.
I'm a forester way back, so that kind of stuff's really important to me, and I want to be sure that if we're using wood, we're using it for the highest value in the end.
Why don't we take one more question right here? Yep.
Don, I'm glad you brought up dissolved wood pulp. Right now, the closest facility is right across the border from Bolton, the AV mill there. Do you think that those capabilities in that business line is going to come on into a main producer anytime soon?
Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of people who are producing craft pulp who are excited about dissolving pulp because it's higher value. So the more that come on, the more supply and demand there is. It's a huge investment. So I think that given probably where dissolving pulp pricing is right now, that there might not be high energy for that. I don't know if you know about the tariffs that the Chinese have set up on dissolving pulp to protect their own industry, so that's certainly a factor right now. One of the things that we did, I think that was really smart in Cloquet, was that pulp mill can make craft or dissolving pulp. And so that pulp mill can actually swing back and forth. So that was a brilliant idea on somebody's part, so we can kind of get in and out of the market. But I'd say both with the Chinese tariffs and kind of where right now, I certainly don't have any insight to what other paper companies are going to do, but I think it would be kind of the wrong time right now to get into dissolving pulp.
Yeah, I don't see anybody in the state of Maine investing $200 million to do that. It's just a big investment for a market that may have already peaked, so.
Well, thank you. I want to thank the panelists again. These examples are the future of the pulp and paper industry. I think we're in good shape with their enthusiasm and energy. So, again, thank you so much. But thank you all for coming. Jeff has a few announcements.
I just want to take a couple of minutes. I want to thank our channel, Donna, Daryl, John. I especially want to thank John for working with us through the Maine Pulp and Paper Association to build this great panel. And to show our appreciation, I want to hand out paper to each of them. This is the Sunrise Guide for 2014. It's about $4,000 of savings and coupons, also paper.
Whoa, now we're talking.
I want to thank our sponsors, Growing Woodsome, Pierce Atwood, E2Tech, CEI, Fairchild, Maine Biz, and 19 Oaks.
Geez, that was
Without
worth the
them, we
drive
wouldn't be able to
Yeah.
have the forums that we put on for you. Our
nice
next
work, by the way. Nice
monthly
presentation.
forum is on
Thank you.
March 20th. It's in Augusta,
It's a
Colorado
fantastic-
area.
Yeah,
It's
you
on
can
the
tell you
regional
like it.
electricity grid and natural gas pipeline, just a little minor issue right now in the state of Maine and throughout the region. But we do have Governor LePage, we have PUC Chairman Tom Welch, we have environmental, renewable, and industrial representatives there. We have ISO New England coming up, so it should be a pretty good program. On your way out, more paper, grab the spring brochure for E2Tech, check out some of our programs and initiatives, and some of the projects that you can get involved with. And for you non-members out there, I hope you can switch over to that member category. Thanks.
Thank you.